Good morning, everybody. Hello and welcome to the third annual MSS Texas Forum. It's a great pleasure to see everyone here. We're starting the day. It's a panel. Love starting with panels. I feel panels can help us get to grips with a lot of the topics from throughout the day. And as always, we are interested in the interplay between end customer and third-party security. That's why we have people and friends from the MSS, MSP, and customer side as well. And together, we're going to unlock the mysteries of improving this security relationship. On our opening panel, we are very, very pleased to welcome Shrinivasan Mani, cybersecurity leader, managed security services and operations practice at Protiviti, Izzac Gonzalez, senior IT architect at IBM, Ashok Kakani, client CISO in Spira Enterprise, Sandor Slijderink, incoming security architect at somewhere very important and Texas related, Brady Roberts, Chief Operating Officer, Emergent Risk International. Morning, everyone. How are you all doing?
Fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm in Toronto today, so that's why you'll see I have a different background, but I love being on this side of the pond. Texas, though, what a big place, what a diverse place. And it's very, very good to be back here in Texas. We're asking a question about the leader of tomorrow, and I guess one of the reasons we're asking for the leader is because we sort of point to them. We sort of blame the leader often for all sorts of things. Why are we looking for the leader, Sandor? We're looking for the leader in this context, and we're hoping that said leader, and we're not giving them a name, right? Notice I didn't say CISO, CIO, whatever. Why are we looking for a leader anyway?
Usually the times that we're looking for the leader are when bad things happen. So we're looking for, who do we blame? Who do we talk to? Who do we get answers from? Who are we holding accountable and responsible for as a person that might be involved as part of that, collateral damage, so to speak, from a security event. I think outside of that, most people in the general public really don't care who is leading unless they're somebody, like an Elon Musk, Bill Gates kind of a person that's going to be in the spotlight leading something.
Okay, and I guess that is emotive, because that sort of puts a public figure to what is a very complex question. Ashok, let me come to you. Let's take a step back. We're talking interplay between MSS, MSP, and customer. Who actually owns security anyway? We're looking for this leader, and I guess it's the responsibility accountability question.
Yeah, so I think it is a shared responsibility, right? So when you're talking about, right, who owns it, right? If I'm the application owner, then I'm responsible. But if I'm using managed services, then whatever the services they are doing it, they are responsible for their activities, what they are doing it, right? It's a shared responsibility, and not one person. But at the end of the day, right, if I'm the one who is actually providing services to the company, then I will be accountable for it.
Okay, that's interesting, because often with these sorts of debates, we end up saying, oh no, it must be the end customer. But if you're the one providing the service, I suppose, then legally you're sort of accountable. Izzac, let me come to you. We're hoping in this panel to say the leader, quote unquote, CIO, CSO, CRO, C something O maybe. Why is that an enduring question? I mean, what has happened to the career path for that leader? Is it obvious today?
Yeah, it's an interesting path. It's a journey, in terms of when you speak of a leader, in terms of, well, what is a leader? How do you become a leader? How do you get there, right? And it's not a one size fits all model, in my opinion, right? I mean, it really comes from your history, your background, and I think one of the best things about the security realm and what we can bring to the table is us having different backgrounds, right? And coming to a place where we're working on a common goal or a common objective, right? Whether it's protecting ourselves, protecting a customer environment, whatever the case may be, our experiences, our skills, right? It may not be a technical kind of background. It may be a financial background or a psychological kind of background, but all that combined together, I think really helps shape the future of what a leader, is and how a leader becomes a really great and effective leader.
And you sort of touch on skill sets that are rather diverse and interesting, and it has been mentioned. Hang on, well, if that's the case, why don't we have an accountant as the leader? Well, why don't we have some sort of masterful puppeteer HR person, or I don't know, like. What do you think, Shrinivasan? I think this is quite interesting, because the leader's dealing more and more with less things that are in the weeds, or so. What do you think, Shrinivasan?
Correct. So CISO's role has less become just to manage security operations. It's more as an architect, as an advisor to the board, and many times they are part of the overall risk committee of the board, not just from an operations perspective. The role has been steadily elevated over time, which it comes the responsibility. Yes, when you outsource, you have a shared responsibility for the execution of it, but from your customers, internal customers or external customers, in terms of your third parties and etc., CISO still carries the responsibility. The board is not going to go pull up the MSS service provider and ask them questions. The board is going to pull up the CISO and demand him or her to give an answer. So the role of the CISO has increased. The role of the CISO has become sort of like an architect, like obviously is a leader, an architect, as an IT leader, as a IT planner, as a visionary, because he or she not only has to think about today's problems, they have to fight for tomorrow's problems, tomorrow's budgets, and plan for year and a half ahead. Because the board is today worrying about what is going to be my expense for next year, what is going to be my profitability for next year or the year after. And yes, they report on a quarter, but they are thinking about from a longer term perspective.
And that longer term perspective, it's sort of, it's less engineer by the second in a way. Not that engineers can't be longer term, can't be business minded, but we'll get into that with another panel. Brady, you come at this from the corporate security side, the physical security side, and risk management. I feel there's a similar story to be told there, because the CSO sometimes gets both sides of the house, logical, physical. The CSO is not a man guard. It's CSO is not a special forces something. Is this as true on the physical side as it is on the cyber side?
Yes, I would say, absolutely right. I could take Shrinivasan's comments and literally flip them around to the physical security side. You're the architect, right? You need to have a deep understanding of what it takes to secure an organization writ large, and then be able to coach and work with all of those folks underneath you and making sure that you're architecting. And then, when it comes to questions to the board or questions to the C-suite, all the same applies.
Yeah, the same applies. And I guess then, so, all right, let me bring it back to Sandor, because Sandor, what I'm kind of getting at is the idea that the top post holder is less technical because they are working with third parties that might take that technical nature away from them. But then conversely, you become the manager of the third party. So what are we saying? If that's the case, is the CISO or the CSO a contract manager?
In some ways, it's not always limited to just the CEO, the C-suite in charge of that security portion of it. We have to look at a risk transfer and understand where that risk transfer takes place. We had a discussion about this earlier this week, where if a leader, regardless of what level their leadership is not aware of a risk, then that risk is not on that leader per se, depending on how it unfolds, of course. But once the leader is informed of that risk, then the risk now is in the hands of whatever of that leader until they transfer it to, you know, someone higher that can make an actionable determination on what to do with that specific risk. I think a great analogy that I utilized is I live in a small suburb outside of, you know, the main city. It's coming up. I've got 10 homes now. We see 20 other homes getting built, and we see there's an intersection, and, you know, accidents, it looks like they're going to be coming very, very soon. At that time, the risk is on on those residents that are currently there. But when we take that and bring it to the city and say, hey, we've got a problem in our little subdivision and we want stop signs there. If the city says we're not going to put stop signs there for whatever reason, budget, we don't see it, et cetera, the risk is now on the city and no longer on that little community, that subdivision. So if something happens, the city is now responsible with evidence showing that they were aware and made knowledge of, you know, were given the knowledge about the risks that were happening in that area. So that's where we got to look at. We got to look at that transference of risk. Where did it stop, and who, you know, at the top, who's the highest level person responsible for that risk?
Oh yeah, and Srini,
but many times, just extending this analogy, it's an excellent analogy onto us, the CISO role. Just because the CISO or an operation manager has brought it to the attention of senior manager that there is a risk, doesn't mean that they somehow take over the risk. Many times they want specific information on what is the impact of the risk, what is the cost for the company if it's not addressed. So otherwise it will become like crying wolf. So the point is, I think somebody else mentioned, we need to have actionable information or actionable intelligence, just extending actionable information on the nature of the risk, the impact of the risk, and what is the cost for the company if it's not addressed. If it has to be addressed, or there should be compensative controls. So in this case, it could be a speed sign or anything. It would just be even a sign on the road saying go slow.
Absolutely. No, and it's a matter of, and let me rephrase, it's proper risk transference. I can't just say, hey, the Bergens are coming. But what I can do is I can say, you know what, the Bergens are coming. They're about 25 miles away, hiding behind this tree. They're going to be jumping us at this point in time, et cetera, whatever the specific details are. Now we have something that's actionable on that risk. And with that risk transference, it's now properly been transferred, not just we think someone's going to get hit at this intersection.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, Ashok, what do you think? Because we're looking for this leader. We're wondering, I guess, are they a vendor manager now, just because they've transferred risk or not? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, right. So the same analogy, if you see that, right. So you need to put some compensatory controls and training and awareness, and you also need to do diligence on your side, right? I think there was one scenario last week, I was part of the event where the FBI was coming in, and they were saying is that, right, hey, company was trying to move away all the legacy servers, and then they gave it to a third-party company who is supposed to actually, right, wipe the disk and throw it off. But what happened was that the person who is supposed to dispose it did not wipe off, and then it went into the black market, right? So if you see that, the individual, whoever is currently running that program, may had to have some additional control in place. But if that infrastructure is very critical, he would have had somebody physically verify that somebody is wiping it before it goes out of the data center, right? So that means you cannot just transfer the risk to somebody. You as an Indian, right, as an individual, what are the preventive controls you are putting in place so that you are not just relying on the third-party company? So that's where the due diligence, and then what are the preventive actions you can do it, so that even if the things fail, there is somebody else to catch it. So it's might like a dual control in place for any critical infrastructure as much as possible.
Yeah. I want to reiterate that, right, in terms of the due diligence, because I think that's absolutely critical, especially when dealing with third parties. And depending on the size of your organization, right, you may have a formal, mature process for how you engage, right, a third party entity. You may have a process where you do an upfront assessment, right, of a third party to see, well, just how risky are they, how scary are they, what kind of history do they have? Do they have a history of, ransomware incidents and whatnot? So you do your due diligence up front, right, and then set that in place with contracts and terms, right, and then from there you must continue that, right, to say how can we do some kind of continuous monitoring so that we can ensure the third party isn't doing anything scary as we progress through the life cycle of that engagement. So there's a lot involved in that space, and I think it really comes down to understanding the risk associated with the engagement with the third party. What type of data is being transferred? How is the service being used from a confidentiality, integrity, and availability perspective, right? And then figuring out, are we willing to accept that risk, right? And to the points earlier, right, what kind of secondary mitigating controls can we put in place if there is risk to try and mitigate some of that risk?
So Isaac, are we saying that it's not so much a vendor manager, but a third-party risk mitigation specialist leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a part of it, right? Is the assessment piece, the mitigation piece, right, and the acceptance piece is. I think that's absolutely critical because, we rely on third-party vendors so much, and many times, right, they hold some very critical, sensitive information, and we need to proceed with caution. So as a leader, we need to be able to either recognize that and understand that, again, depending on the size or maturity of your organization, or have a dedicated person or a team, right, who's really focused on that specific area. So critical.
Yeah, and Isaac, and sorry, Isaac, it's such a simple process really to put in place. Our
It doesn't have to be complicated, right?
No, and our company, we're a SaaS platform provider, and our very best customers not only do that due diligence up front, right, and come to us with all of the questions, and we lay out all of our architecture, all of our security controls in place, but they come back once a year. And this seems crazy to some people, but once a year and audit us, and the audit is simply, please come back and provide this questionnaire, and we as providers, as third-party providers, we are happy to do that, and in fact, we're happy to show off. And that's one thing that I think sometimes some teams don't realize. We're happy to show off. You want to see SOC 2 on this? Yes, absolutely.
Show the SOC 2. Show the pen test results. A lot of time
and pain to do that. Let us.
Show the pen test results. Yeah.
But it really is that simple as a leader to just have that process in place, have it standardized, have those questions go out. You can automate all of that, and then it's even that yearly review.
And many times it is like
also look.
So should we go to Shrivani and then Sandor, maybe? Yeah,
many times it is a question of literally belling the cat. So everybody wants somebody else to take the lead and bring up things. Like you were saying, show me the pen test, right? Even sometimes people don't ask that, okay, show me this, show me that specific items to show. And it becomes like, say, it's just becomes like a collective crib session about vendor is not open, he's not open, that's not. So having a proper communication about these are the things I require from you by certain date and why to the third parties will definitely help, because the third parties have a business to run. We are not their only customer. They probably are working with many other customers, and they are in the business of making money. So so then they can plan and assign a time slice to address this, which is important for them because they need to continue to be our vendor and make money, continue to make money and do it in a secure way for themselves as well as us. Because if they get impacted, we get impacted, but they probably get wiped out with the legal fees as well as other costs. So that's something to think about. Yeah, Sandor, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. And something to look at too, especially when you're onboarding a new vendor. And prior to that, I think a risk assessment, a risk analysis, I think, Isaac, you mentioned some of that. But we also want to make sure that the vendor's policies are aligned with our own. We want to make sure that they've
Very much
got,
so.
that they're not stuck at a 256-bit encryption policy, where ours is, 2048 or 4096-bit encryption policy on SSLs, for instance. So we want to make sure that those policies align with our own. And if they don't, not say we out that vendor, but work with them in such a way that we can, create a bridge between that and understand and address, just like you would with a risk assessment and a risk analysis, look at that relationship there via the policy and the standards that are backing those policies. And then going a step further too is looking at the enforcement of the policies. Just because you have a policy in place doesn't mean that a policy is being enforced.
Right.
I've seen many companies that say, "Oh, we require that policies, via policy that your password is changed every 90 days." And then you go and talk to some of the people, even in the information technology and information security, and go, "When was the last time you changed your password?" And go, "It's been, about a year and a half now." So looking at the enforcement of that policies, is crucial to that as well, and understanding that risk between you and your third party.
Yeah, Bill, I think just kind of tying it back into the whole leadership, kind of idea, right? Is as a leader, whether it's the CISO, whatever, right? I mean, again, depending on the size of the organization or the maturity of the organization, the CISO may kind of be doing this work, but most likely not, right? But it's important for the CISO to recognize if the organization is having to leverage third-party vendors, then it's incumbent on the CISO or some leader, right, to say, hey, we need to have formal, mature processes for handling, right, these situations. Exactly everything we've been describing when dealing with third-party vendors, so that we can ensure that we are doing it in a manner that is secure. There are a lot of vendors out there, like I said, trying to make money. If you look at their websites, right, they say, oh, we're secure. But when you start poking and looking under the covers, it's really not the case. So that's where your due diligence and your formal processes, right, has to come into play to ensure the security of your organization, your data.
And Isaac,
and sometimes you don't even have to look at the under the covers. You can look right on top of the covers and see the bed bugs crawling right around. You're like, come on,
that's a good point.
Let's clean some things up here.
But then how? Because we all like to see innovation, and we seem to like championing the underdog. And in fact, I was running a conference last week in DC, and somebody said this company came to them, and they were small and hungry, and they said, "Wow, I've got this visibility thing, and I don't want to give too much away as to who they were, but they had something." And the vendor said, "You know what? You're too small, but if you just did this and this and this, I mean, I guess that's nice." But it's not really the job of the end customer to say, "Do you know what? Let me help you develop your entire product." I don't know, Isaac. How can we balance that? Because as a leader, you want to give the smaller vendors a chance, don't you? But how?
I think it comes down to, are you willing to accept that risk, right? I mean, in terms of the benefits, what is it? As part of your assessment, is what this vendor potentially looking to provide to you outweigh the potential risks associated with taking a chance on somebody who's new and maybe doesn't have mature processes?
And how communicable are they?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. If you really need the customer service, and you're going to get them instantly versus something really large, but then I don't know, like, is this the job of the emergent leader? Brady, I'm sure.
I'll flip it. I'll flip the coin.
Yeah.
1 second. I'll flip the coin on that if you don't mind. As someone who once upon a time was one of those small vendors, right? So we built, and now we're obviously not, we're a much larger and global company, but we first started working with a small handful of clients who came to us and said, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And if you can do that, we can get you into procurement. And they take the time to do that. And truly, like, that launched us. But it took that feedback initially, that customer feedback, to get there. It's so invaluable. And if you, I guess all I can say is, in these niche, these anecdotal cases, if this product, the value is there for you, take those 15 minutes to go through that process with them, because you'll end up ultimately with a vendor that might very well have a very innovative and kind of, plate breaking sort of technology or value add for you that, you might not get. But sometimes, the small vendors, anyway, I'll speak for them. those innovators, those people that are just getting started, help them out. Give them a few minutes.
No, and I'll just touch on that real quick, because I've been on the other side, right? We're as a mature organization, we're working with those folks, and we realize, hey, they almost need our help, right? And we're helping them in as far as, you know, what our standard terms include and what our expectations are. So the vendors are saying, oh yeah, we should probably do that, and so they go off and do it. So it's a process.
Everybody looks at that for the first time.
Yeah,
like at some point when they're getting started. Anyway.
Yeah.
My two bits for the startup world.
Well, I thought I'd throw that out there because I thought we could throw a bone to lots of people who might be, you know, anywhere in the audience perhaps or elsewhere. Now, Ashok, so we're looking at this leader. We're looking at their changing sort of career path. We're looking at their changing sort of acumen. How important is business acumen for them? And I say that with a caveat. What is business acumen for them? Because it's definitely not like hustling with lemonade stands. It's something else, isn't it? It's an appreciation.
Yeah, so I think just to add a few more items, right? So one is that, right, whatever may be the position and role, if you are not aligned to your business, right, the business who is bringing revenue to the company, then I think the process is failing, right? And then just add on the, hey, how to help support some of the new companies to come in is that as long as you have a process on how they handle your data, and then, right, your risk profile is, right, good, then I think it's okay to open doors for the, small, medium business or startup companies. But I think you need to do a due diligence and make sure that your data is protected. So example, it may be a SaaS application where we subscribe to, but if you are trying to store some information about your company, instead of them storing in their cloud, can you store it in your cloud so that, right, they provide more as a front-end platform, but the data management is happening on the platform which is managed by your team, right? So that way, there is a segregation of duty, and then the data handling is managed on your side to reduce the risk, right? So that's where from the leadership perspective or from the C-level executives is how are you aligned with your business so that, right, if the third-party company is having a problem, you don't get into any of the infrastructure failures or application failures where you're going to lose revenue or business.
Yeah, and you definitely don't like being a cost center, but you definitely don't want to go the other way completely. So I appreciate that. Shrinivasan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. So from a business context perspective, a CISO not only needs to understand their business and know which is the critical aspect of their business, they have to understand what are the services provided by this third party. The third party might be providing a business service, which might be critical they may not be a large player, they may be a small player, but even though they may not be handling very critical data for you in your data classification, but from the service perspective, they may be critical. So you not only need to understand the criticality of the service, we need to understand the criticality of the data being handled because you need to secure it because they could be a crown jewels. But we also need to understand the criticality of the service because both go hand in hand. And that will be known only if the CISO understands their business very well. Otherwise, you will be trying to handle all your stakeholders in the same way and leave out the most important person who is bringing in the moolah. Like, for example, in one of my customers, the field engineer was considered the god. The reason why the field engineer is considered God is he or she is actually writing the check at that point, even though they are out in the thing. So when there is a request from them, it could be for a privileged account, it could be for doing a network port open, or it could be for anything, just even requesting for a report. That was given the highest priority because that is important at that minute to close the deal with their end customer. So understanding the business is important because then you prioritize their request for it. And that's so far, not just in this case, but in any case, to understand the business, your, I call it business intelligence, your business overview for your organization and for third parties. Yeah.
And so maybe that's it. Business intelligence, Shrinivasan. It's not you have to get in sales and start pitching people, because I think the word business acumen is either misused, misunderstood, or maybe I'm misunderstanding it. But I feel it's something different. It's not that you have to go and become a lawyer, but you have to know when to call general counsel. Not you don't have to become a top sales rep, but you have to go, oi, what have you put in this contract? I definitely can't deliver quantum blah 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 blah. I think that's probably a good way to look at it. Nice comment from Joe in the audience. Joe says he likes Brady's comment before. Key is capability and trust companies see in a provider, really big or small, that leads to a partnership. ERI, a great example of how to do it right. Okay, very good. Good shout out for you, Brady. I've lost my place on who was before who, but Ashok, let me come to you. We're looking then as maybe chief partnerships officer, because that would encompass the business side. That would encompass the partnerships with the, as Srini said, field engineer leader of the future. Is that maybe where we should take the top post holder in today's event?
Yeah, definitely. I think, right. So partnership between the teams, whether it is going to be internal or external, it is key for success, right? So if the initiatives from the security team, if they're not aligned with the IT initiatives or a business initiative, then it's going to fail. So that means, right, you have to partner with them and then work together for the same goal, right? So, and then if you have an initiative and if the vendor is not supporting you to push the right patches or updates, then I think the project is going to fail, right? So it's a partnership within the company, within the teams, and also with third-party companies to reach the goal within the expected timeline.
It's a delicate balance, it's there's just so much that has to be juggled. And I like the word partnership because that's really what it is, right? I mean, as a partner with your own tech folks, with your sales folks, with your business folks, with your customers, right? Let's not forget the customer side as well. We need to, have that empathy, put ourselves in their shoes. What are their ultimate needs? What are their ultimate requirements, right? And how do you juggle that and balance that, securely and in a way that you can make money? Or moolah, I think Srini mentioned.
Before the partnership builds, you need to build trust. That we need to build trust with the third party. The third party needs to build trust. Obviously, also internal customers, but specifically with reference to third parties, we need to build two-way trust so they can trust. Then once that is built, a partnership is built, then patching or sharing penetration test report or SOC report or anything else, even telling that, hey, I have a breach which has happened and I am in the process of addressing it and I will have to report it, but I'm telling you first so that as you are my friend, so that we can help and have you face. And another thing I've seen is in some of my customers, we built a CISO council across multiple CISOs. So there could be a free, frank, very, what can I say, flow of information in a very unofficial manner, which they could never do as in an official channel. So here, there is a lot of information exchange and more importantly, sharing of risks, which they feel are what the dark clouds looming across the horizon for them, which gives the other people fair warning. Think about that as a part of the partnership.
Yeah, fair warning for expectations. So Sandor, what do you think?
No, I love it. I had a question, and this might be something great for Shrinivasan, as well as Isaac, all of us here. But what are your thoughts on pen testing our third parties?
Yeah, I think Yeah, so pen test on the third parties, I think it has to be, is that part of your contract? Because normally, right, if your contract says and then if they agree for it, that is something you can do it, because and then no, normally you add that as a class if you are a tier 1 partner, right? If there is a tier 2 or tier 3, you may not do that, but tier 1, that is something you can. And then normally what most of the companies they do is called external attack surface management, so that you don't need to do a pen test, but right, you have solutions which is going to give you a score, what is an outside risk view. And then if you see those numbers going down drastically by X percentage, then you initiate an audit, right? Or where you go right to audit is a class you add it to it. Say, hey, currently your security score is 90 out of 100, which is good. But suddenly if I see a drop of 10% or more than 10%, then we will come and do an audit, right? So that way it is part of your contract agreement, right? Contractual agreement. And then, right, so most of the companies, they are trying to get away from that 1-year pen test because it's a point in time. Rather, if it is a tier 1 partner, we are working with them to build something called as a continuous security assessment. So to make sure that, right, your security controls are in place so that it's not a point in time once in a year. And then, right, because if you do the patching and then, right, you take a pen test, and then end of the year, and then after that you don't patch it for next 9 months, and you do the patching once again just before the pen test, right? So to avoid that, you can add some clause, you can put some continuous security assessment, so that no, you don't get into that issue and then looking for external pen test to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think pen tests should be done one monthly or at least quarterly. But when you do one pen test, once you resolve the issues that were found in the pen test, is have a second pen test or basically another pen test come out afterwards to affirm that you actually fix those things.
Yeah, normally as part of the pen test process itself, that's how they do it. When they give you a report, you have to fix it, and then right, they do a recheck. And then normally when they share a report to you, they only share the report that, hey, we had a pen test and all the issues are resolved. They are not going to share a pen test report where all the issues are open. None of the company is going to do that, right? So, So, but as far as we doing it, I think it has to be part of that, because it's otherwise it's a violation of controls.
And maybe it doesn't even need to be a full-on pen test, right? Maybe it just kind of depends on the risk associated with the engagement, with the relationship with this vendor, right? I mean, again, if you're dealing with highly critical data being transferred to this vendor, or maybe from an availability perspective, right, there's high risk, then maybe you would expect within your contract terms, more frequent pen tests, whatever that may be. But if not, maybe it's a transfer of a vulnerability assessment report, right, from Nessus or something like that, something along those lines, right? Just to kind of stay on top, maintain that oversight and assurance that the organization is maintaining, right, the security of their environment. It really just kind of depends, again, on the engagement, the risk, and the expectations set out within the contract terms.
Yeah, so a few of the things we have added as part of that is that instead of a yearly pen test, right, we want them to share a monthly vulnerability report where if the issue has not been remediated within their policy date, right? Hey, high critical vulnerabilities has to be managed within 90 days. They have to share as a report if that goes above that ceiling, and what are the compensatory control they have. So that, right, we have those mechanisms in place, right? And then we just divide those things like, hey, share your internal audit, right? If you're doing a quarterly audit, we want you to share your CAPA plan, that what are your findings and what is your remediation plan. So that way, it's more of a continuous engagement, because we are indirectly being, right, in partnership with them. So that means, right, we want to be successful together.
Well, I have a point to add here. Yeah, so pen test is good, but as Ashok said, continuous vulnerability assessment would be a lot more important. which is like a score which is being published periodically. And then if the score goes below a certain threshold, talk about sharing some of their vulnerabilities. Because many a times there may be open vulnerabilities which they are working on, but there are compensatory controls. So your third party might not get impacted. So even if there is a pen test, that pen test might not be able to exploit that vulnerability. But that open vulnerability can actually impact you, because you are not aware of that open vulnerability, and that can lead to somebody exploiting it and affecting you. So you being aware of it, and so you planning to have compensatory controls for that vulnerability will be important. So pen test is probably something down the line, but sure, knowing exactly what is the vulnerability status, the position, the score, and open vulnerabilities would be a lot more important for you. Pen test is probably the icing on the cake if you can do. But I don't know whether anybody will allow you to do pen test once a month. I don't think organizations do it once a month for themselves, let alone allow your
Oh, no, I would
client.
recommend doing it once a month for our organization. But to your point, in regards to just because they have a vulnerable system, someone's got a Windows XP system running XYZ ICS, industrial control. If they've got it copper segmented and they've put a perimeter around it with robust, monitoring, alerting, IDS, IPS, the whole 9 yards, then, there's no way really to get to it, if they've got a pretty good spec. It's not as big of a risk as it appears looking through like a site through Shodan or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Can I, because we've only got 3 minutes left, can I ask the chairman's question? Since we're looking at the leader of tomorrow, and since we got 3 minutes, Brady, what then does all of this, because what I'm really hearing is that the leader is a risk manager. The leader is someone that orchestrates pen testing once a month, once a year, who knows? But tell me about the conclusion that we can draw from this. Plus, why are we in Texas? Is there anything special about Texas? I think that's a nice way to sort of round it up.
What is special about Texas? Oh boy. There's a whole lot to unpack there. I don't know, the last couple of years, all I can think about really in Texas is business continuity for all of us locally. But I think for what I would hit on most, I think probably the most important thing we discussed and maybe this entire conversation, which has been great, is the importance of understanding the business, understanding what role you play in it, wherever you are as a leader in the organization. And, so many of the principles that we talked about, for example, for the CISO, it applies to every single leader at that level across the organization. If you don't know how the business earns its revenue, what its priorities are, what keeps it afloat, you're not going to be successful in this, in your role, whether you're head of HR, you're the CISO, you're the CSO, you have to really understand exactly how the business earns revenue and then what role you can play to support that. And if your risk decisions, when you're reporting up, if your risk decisions are based on that knowledge base, then you're going to do fairly well.
I like it. And just in reference to our previous chat, Richard Cannon in the audience says pen testing vendors should align to the position they hold in your customer pipeline or supply chain. The more integrated they are, the higher the risk. See, I read out everything. Anything comes in, I'll read it out. So be careful, or at least I should be careful. Well, good. I know this is a tour de force, but it's supposed to set the tone for the day. It's supposed to flesh out a lot of the topics that we'll go through with our MSP, MSS, PN customer community. I'm sure the topic of why we're in Texas will come up again. So don't worry that we haven't really fleshed that out. I think time zone is one thing that came up in the pre-chat. Very good time zone. But I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for kicking us off with the MSS Texas. Look forward to seeing you again in person and virtually. So let's give Brady, Sandor, Srinivasan, Ashok, and Izzac a big virtual round of applause. And I'll put you back in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.